Could the bargains we trust to save money be quietly costing us more in taste, health, and even peace of mind? Picture a cart filled with familiar boxes and cans, chosen to stretch the family budget, only to find their quality falters where it matters most. What hidden truths lie in these everyday choices, and are they worth the risk? We begin with a pantry staple that often looked like a bargain, but rarely delivered the taste or crunch families expected: store-brand breakfast cereals. Breakfast cereal is more than just a food item. It is a ritual, a memory, and for many Americans, the unofficial start of childhood mornings. The bright boxes, cartoon mascots, and colorful flakes carried not just flavor, but also excitement. Families who turned to store brand versions often hoped that saving a few dollars would not mean sacrificing those traditions. Yet what they found was a pale imitation of something beloved. The first spoonful revealed the difference. Cornflakes turned soggy almost as soon as milk touched them. Puffed rice carried no snap, dissolving into a soft, disappointing mass. The playful marshmallows that children had come to expect in certain cereals looked faded, tasted flat, and lacked the magic of their brighter counterparts. Parents, eager to stretch their grocery budgets, learned the hard way that savings sometimes came at the expense of morning joy. Taste was another stumbling block. Instead of balanced sweetness layered over the grain, many store-brand cereals tasted one-dimensional. Some leaned heavily on sugar, masking any real flavor beneath. Others swung the opposite way, leaving behind a blandness that made the bowl feel unfinished. For children, it was enough to push the bowl aside. For adults, it was a reminder that substitutions do not always satisfy. Yet these cereals stayed on shelves because they represented a choice: economy over indulgence, thrift over tradition. For households in leaner times, they were better than nothing. But the gap they left behind was more than just in taste. It was in memory. The sound of flakes crunching, the playful mascots on the box, the shared joy of breakfast lost some of its spark. Store-brand cereals remind us that food is not only about nutrition, it is about experience. And when that experience falls short, the disappointment lingers longer than the taste itself. Moving on, we find another disappointment in something as simple yet essential as a sandwich spread: store-brand peanut butter. Few foods hold as much emotional weight as peanut butter. It is the glue of childhood lunches, the comfort food of late-night snacks, and the symbol of homegrown American simplicity. Spread across bread, paired with jelly, or eaten by the spoonful, it carries with it a sense of nostalgia. But when families reached for store-brand jars, they often discovered that this simple staple was not so easily imitated. Texture was the first betrayal. Instead of the silky smoothness or chunky richness that defined favorite brands, many store-brand versions separated into oily tops and chalky bottoms. No amount of stirring could restore balance. The result was a spread that clung poorly to bread, leaving sandwiches greasy on the outside and dry on the inside. For children, this was reason enough to reject their lunch. For parents, it was a quiet frustration at money saved but value lost. Flavor, too, often missed the mark. Some leaned on too much salt or sugar, overwhelming the natural taste of roasted peanuts. Others lacked depth entirely, leaving behind something that tasted faintly artificial, almost hollow. Where the right peanut butter felt hearty and grounding, store-brand jars delivered disappointment in every bite. The difference was not subtle. It was immediate. And because peanut butter carries cultural weight, a food tied to soldiers and rations, to health campaigns, to the idea of wholesome family meals, its failure was amplified. A sandwich that felt off was not just a bad lunch, but a broken tradition. Shoppers might give store-brand peanut butter a try once, but few returned for a second jar. The lesson was simple. Some foods are too central to compromise. Peanut butter was one of them. The disappointment of store-brand jars revealed not just a difference in recipe, but the limits of substitution in foods that define identity. From here, the story shifts to the fizz that so many hoped would stand in for the familiar, only to leave gatherings feeling second-rate: store-brand soft drinks. Soft drinks are more than refreshment. They are part of celebrations, barbecues, and everyday treats. The sound of a can opening, the rush of bubbles against the tongue, the sweetness that pairs perfectly with a slice of pizza or a summer afternoon. These small rituals have shaped American life for generations. When store-brand sodas entered the picture, they promised all of that at a fraction of the cost. But for anyone who took a sip, the difference was impossible to ignore. The first failure was in carbonation. Popular sodas had a fizz that felt alive, dancing in the mouth, lifting spirits instantly. Store-brand versions often went flat quickly, their bubbles weak and unsatisfying. Even unopened bottles carried less energy, leaving the drink tired before the first sip was finished. Flavor was another loss. Colas missed the delicate balance of caramel, spice, and sweetness, tasting metallic or medicinal instead. Citrus drinks lacked brightness, falling into either bitter or syrupy territory. Guests noticed, and so did hosts. A barbecue stocked with generic bottles carried an unspoken sense of compromise, a quiet signal that celebration had been scaled back. Glasses were poured, but many went unfinished. Soft drinks carry cultural meaning. They are tied to road trips, movie theaters, or long afternoons with friends. When the flavor faltered, so did those associations. Families saved money, but they lost more than taste. They lost the magic of moments tied to fizz, flavor, and fun. Store-brand sodas may have offered thrift, but they also carried the weight of being second best, a reminder that not all substitutions can sparkle. Another example worth considering is the household roll that promised savings, but fell apart in practice: store-brand paper towels. Paper towels are not glamorous, but they are essential. They step in during spills in cooking and cleaning, the unsung hero of everyday messes. When families reached for store-brand rolls, they hoped to save money on something disposable. What they often found was a compromise too thin to hold. At first glance, the rolls looked the same: white sheets, perforated edges, stacked neatly on the shelf. But the difference showed itself the moment the first spill was blotted. Store-brand towels tore easily, dissolved under pressure, or soaked through in seconds. Where branded versions offered strength with just one sheet, generic rolls often required 3 or 4. What was saved at checkout was lost in usage. The disappointment was not only practical, but emotional. In the kitchen, where cooking and family meals brought people together, paper towels that failed felt like tools that could not be trusted. Cleaning up grease, wiping counters, or drying hands became a reminder of cut corners. Instead of support, these products added frustration to everyday routines. And because paper towels are meant to be invisible helpers, their failure stood out all the more. Guests noticed when a roll crumbled in their hands. Families remembered when a spill spread further because a towel tore apart. These small inconveniences created a sense of regret that outweighed the savings. Paper towels may seem like an afterthought, but in reality, they embody the question of whether cheaper always means better. Store-brand rolls promised thrift, but delivered doubt. They left behind not just torn sheets, but a reminder that reliability matters most in the moments we least expect. We next arrive at the washroom, where thrift came at the cost of freshness and faith in clean clothes. Store-brand laundry detergent. Laundry has always carried quiet importance. It is the unseen work that shapes how families present themselves to the world, a rhythm of washing and folding that speaks to care and dignity. Clean shirts send children to school with confidence. Fresh uniforms prepare adults for the workplace, and the subtle fragrance of newly washed clothes signals comfort and pride at home. When detergent falters in this role, the failure is never just technical, it feels personal. Store-brand laundry detergent, while tempting in price, often struggled to live up to the invisible standard households carried with them. Strength was the most immediate shortcoming. Grass stains clung to school pants, food marks lingered on shirts, and everyday wear left a dullness that resisted repeated cycles. Fabrics that should have emerged brighter and softer came out muted, their colors faded and their textures stiff. The promise of economy became a cycle of disappointment. More detergent poured, more water used, more electricity spent, yet still less than satisfying results. Instead of saving money, families found themselves quietly losing time, patience, and trust. Scent played its own role in shaping the verdict. Branded detergents often carried a familiar fragrance, a crisp freshness or a gentle floral note that reassured families that their effort had been rewarded. Store-brand detergents, by contrast, smelled faint, artificial, or overpowering, leaving clothes with an odor that felt cheap rather than comforting. The result was jarring. Even when stains were gone, the scent betrayed the substitution, serving as a constant reminder that something essential had been compromised. The emotional weight of these failures cannot be overstated. Laundry is not only about hygiene, it is about care. Parents look after children by making sure they are dressed in clean, bright clothes. Partners show love in the quiet act of folding and preparing garments for one another. Households across generations have tied dignity to the sense that clothes are fresh and ready for the day. When detergent failed, it was more than a technical flaw. It felt as if thrift had undermined the very act of care itself. For many, this lesson was learned quickly and remembered for years. Store-brand laundry detergent might have promised savings at the checkout line, but the cost showed itself in stubborn stains, faded fabrics, and the subtle erosion of confidence in something as ordinary as a shirt. Once trust was broken, most families returned to the brands they knew. The disappointment lingered not just in the laundry basket, but in memory. It revealed a truth as lasting as the stains it failed to remove. Some essentials, when weakened, leave behind more than dirt. They leave doubt. Turning to snacks, the crackers that should have offered comfort instead brought a sense of staleness and loss. Store-brand crackers. Crackers occupy a surprisingly meaningful place in American kitchens. They are the quick comfort tucked into lunchboxes, the simple side offered with soup, and the familiar base for cheese and spreads at family gatherings. More than just food, they are tied to memory. The plate set out during holidays, the box shared after school, the handful nibbled during the late-night talks. When store-brand crackers promised the same experiences for less, many families hoped thrift would not dull tradition. Yet time and again, what they found was a compromise that made even small moments feel lesser. Texture was the first disappointment. Crackers should snap crisply between the teeth, releasing flavor and giving a satisfying crunch. Store-brand versions too often arrived soft, crumbly, or oddly stale before the package was even finished. That wrongness was not just culinary, it was symbolic. A cracker that failed to crunch disrupted the very role it was meant to play. The bite was dull, and the memory tied to that bite was dulled with it. Flavor offered little redemption. Instead of the light buttery notes or balanced seasoning that made crackers more than a vehicle for cheese, store-brand versions leaned flat, floury, or off in taste. They did not complement soups, nor did they elevate cheese boards. In gatherings, the difference was visible. Guests reached politely, took one or two, then left the box half full. The quiet lack of enthusiasm around the table revealed more than words ever could. Because crackers are tied to childhood and tradition, their failure carried emotional weight. They were not just snacks, they were part of the background music of life. To open a box and find staleness was to disrupt something familiar and comforting. The substitution became obvious, and the silence that followed was louder than complaint. Store-brand crackers, then, became one of the clearest examples of how thrift can undermine simple pleasures. They were not unsafe, nor were they harmful, but they were unsatisfying in ways that mattered deeply. The difference between a satisfying crunch and a soft crumble was enough to shift how people remembered the meal, the gathering, or even the day. Over time, they came to be remembered less as bargains and more as compromises. Not dangerous, but disappointing. Not nourishing, but forgettable. And for something as humble as a cracker, that quiet failure left an enduring mark. And when it came to daily essentials, no compromise was felt more directly than in the thin, scratchy sheets of store-brand toilet paper. Few household items reveal their quality so quickly, and few inspire such immediate regret when they fail. Toilet paper is not glamorous, yet it is one of the most intimate essentials in every home. Store-brand versions, while priced attractively, often became symbols of savings gone too far. The weakness showed itself immediately. Sheets tore easily, sometimes disintegrating under use, forcing families to use far more than expected. What appeared cheap on the shelf became costly in practice, as rolls vanished at double speed. The texture too often felt harsh, turning a daily necessity into discomfort. Where branded products had found a balance of softness and strength, store-brand rolls left no such reassurance. The disappointment carried a sense of vulnerability. Toilet paper is not about indulgence, but about trust. The trust that this most basic need will be met with comfort and reliability. When store-brand rolls fell short, they left behind a lingering sense of regret, one felt by every member of the household. Guests noticed as well. In bathrooms where cheaper rolls had been placed, visitors sometimes commented quietly or remembered silently. These small moments revealed the social weight of even the most private products. Ultimately, toilet paper proved that some items are not worth gambling with. Store-brand rolls taught households that thrift has limits and that discomfort can outweigh any savings. They remain one of the clearest reminders that when it comes to essentials, the cheapest option can be the most costly. Continuing onward, mornings themselves were dulled when weak brews replaced the rich aroma people counted on. Store-brand coffee. Coffee is not only a beverage, it is a ritual. The smell of brewing in the kitchen signals the start of the day, carrying comfort and energy in equal measure. For workers heading out in the morning or families sharing breakfast together, it has long been an anchor. Store-brand coffee promised to fill that role, but rarely delivered the experience that mattered most. The first disappointment was in aroma. Instead of the deep roasted scent that fills a room and stirs anticipation, many store-brand blends smelled faint or oddly burnt. The promise of comfort faded before the first sip was even taken. Taste confirmed the letdown. Where branded coffees offered balance, bitterness softened by richness, acidity sharpened by depth, store-brand cups leaned thin or harsh. Some tasted watered down, others metallic or sour, as though the beans had been stretched too far or roasted without care. The difference was not subtle, it was immediate, and it shaped the entire start of the day. For families, the compromise extended beyond flavor. Coffee is tied to mood, to energy, to the sense of being prepared for what lies ahead. When the morning cup felt lifeless, so did the start of the day. Workers left the house less satisfied, mornings lost their grounding, and routines carried a quiet frustration. Even those who drank coffee more out of habit than taste could feel the change. The simple pleasure of holding a warm mug, smelling its contents, and feeling renewed was weakened by substitutions that felt hollow. Store-brand coffee remains one of the clearest examples of how thrift cannot replace tradition. It did not simply miss in taste, it missed in meaning. And for something as tied to daily life as coffee, that disappointment proved lasting. Even the smallest detail at the dinner table could falter, as families discovered with the off notes of store-brand ketchup. Ketchup may seem simple, but it is one of the most defining condiments in American homes. It is spread across hamburgers, served beside French fries, poured over meatloaf, and kept as a constant companion in refrigerators across the country. Its taste is so familiar that even the slightest shift is noticed immediately. When families brought home store-brand bottles, hoping to stretch their dollars, the compromise was often tasted in the very first bite. The disappointment usually came in balance. Name-brand ketchup carried a precise harmony of sweetness, tang, and spice that had been refined over decades. Store-brand versions often tipped too far in one direction. Some leaned overly sweet, leaving a syrupy finish that drowned out the food beneath. Others carried a sharp acidity that stung the tongue, without the rounded depth that made ketchup comforting. Texture revealed more weaknesses. Instead of the smooth, thick consistency people expected, store-brand ketchup was sometimes watery, separating in the bottle so that a thin liquid spilled out before the condiment itself. This was not just unappealing, it was embarrassing when poured on family meals or gatherings. Children noticed the difference immediately, pushing plates aside when the fries no longer tasted the same. The cultural significance of ketchup deepened the failure. It had long been considered a staple of American comfort food, a universal equalizer that could make simple meals feel whole. To have it taste wrong was not a small issue, it was a disruption of memory itself. Families who gave store brands a chance often returned quickly to the trusted bottles, unwilling to compromise a flavor tied so deeply to identity. Store-brand ketchup serves as a reminder that even condiments carry weight. The savings were real, but the loss was felt more sharply. It revealed that some foods are not just side notes but central characters, and when their taste falters, so does the meal. Finally, among the letdowns, we encounter quick dinners that promised ease but too often delivered cardboard crusts. Store-brand frozen pizza. Pizza holds a special place in American life. It is the meal of birthdays, Friday nights, sleepovers, and late-night cravings. Frozen pizzas, when first introduced, seemed to capture that spirit while offering convenience straight from the freezer. Store-brand versions aimed to make this indulgence even more affordable. Yet too often, what emerged from the oven felt like an echo of what pizza was supposed to be. The crust was the first and most obvious flaw. Instead of a crisp bite or a chewy center, many store-brand pizzas baked into something stiff and dry, resembling cardboard more than bread. Biting into a slice often felt more like chewing through packaging than savoring a meal. The disappointment started before the toppings were even considered. Cheese provided little comfort. Rather than melting into a golden, bubbling layer, it often clumped, separating into oily patches and rubbery strings. The rich flavor people expected from a slice of pizza was replaced by something flat, sometimes even plastic-like in texture. Toppings told the same story. Pepperoni slices were thin and flavorless, vegetables sparse and overcooked, leaving little more than the illusion of generosity. A pizza that should have brought joy instead became a reminder of corners cut. Families saved a few dollars, but they also lost the satisfaction that pizza was supposed to bring. And because pizza is so deeply tied to comfort and celebration, the disappointment carried extra weight. Children who looked forward to pizza night found themselves let down. Parents, hoping for an easy dinner, faced uneaten slices and quiet regret. Store-brand frozen pizza did not just fail in taste or texture, it failed in meaning. It could not capture the spirit of togetherness that pizza had come to symbolize. And for that reason, it became one of the clearest examples of how affordability can come at the cost of joy. Yet not all was lost, and one of the quiet triumphs of the store brand could be found in the steady simplicity of store-brand oats. Unlike cereals filled with sugar or crackers needing precise textures, oats were hard to get wrong. Store-brand oats carried the same humble appearance, rolled, steel-cut, or instant. And when cooked, they offered the same warmth, the same hearty base for breakfast that families had relied on for generations. The taste was neutral, but that was its strength. Nutrition remained intact, making oats a reliable source of fiber and energy. For parents, this meant a way to serve children, something filling without worry. For adults, it provided a foundation for busy mornings, adaptable with fruit, honey, or milk. Store-brand oats often matched their branded counterparts in performance while costing less. The simplicity of oats shielded them from the pitfalls that plagued other store-brand products. There was no fizz to fall flat, no sweetness to tip too far in one direction, no texture that could disappoint. What mattered most was consistency, and in this, store-brand oats held steady. They became symbols of quiet trust. Shoppers knew they could place a bag or container into their cart without hesitation. It was not a choice that carried risk or regret. Instead, it carried reassurance. In a landscape filled with compromises and disappointments, oats were one of the rare victories. They proved that sometimes the most basic foods are also the most reliable, no matter whose label is on the package. And to close, we celebrate the reliable ingredient that strengthened countless home recipes without fail: store-brand canned tomatoes. Canned tomatoes are the backbone of countless dishes. They are simmered into sauces, folded into soups, and stewed into chili. Their role is not to stand alone, but to support, to provide the rich base that allows other flavors to shine. And in this, store-brand cans rose to the challenge. Unlike delicate foods where texture and freshness determine success, tomatoes lent themselves well to preservation. Store-brand cans contained fruit harvested and processed at peak ripeness, offering the same acidity and body as name brands. Whether crushed, diced, or whole, they delivered consistency that home cooks could trust. Families discovered that when cooked into recipes, the differences between labels nearly disappeared. A homemade pasta sauce, a hearty stew, or a pot of chili did not betray whether the tomatoes had come from a national brand or a generic aisle. What mattered most was their reliability. The affordability made them even more appealing. For households on budgets, canned tomatoes allowed meals to stretch further, bringing flavor and nutrition to the table without sacrifice. Unlike cereal or soft drinks, this was one area where savings did not carry regret. Culturally, canned tomatoes became part of the invisible backbone of cooking. They were not flashy, but they were dependable. And when dependability is paired with value, it becomes more than acceptable. It becomes smart. Store-brand canned tomatoes remain one of the few quiet triumphs of generic products. They reminded families that while not every shortcut pays off, some do. And for those who trusted them, they offered not disappointment, but relief. In the end, store-brand items reveal a larger story about trust, thrift, and the quiet choices we make each time we shop. with some leaving us disappointed and a few proving themselves to be steady, smart buys. Together, they remind us that saving money is never just about price, but about value and meaning at the table. If this reflection felt worthwhile, it helps us a lot if you like this video and subscribe to the Hidden Menu for more stories told in this way.